When Socrates and Glaucon enter the house of Polemarchus's father, Cephalus, they find the wealthy old man, quote, garlanded on some sort of an easy chair as he had just been sacrificing in the courtyard. End quote. The ancient Greeks showed their devotion to their gods by making sacrifices, often in the form of blood or burnt sacrifices in which an animal would be slaughtered and burned and offered to the gods as a way to ask for forgiveness or divine assistance in earthly matters, or just to keep the gods happy. The more money you had, the more valuable the animals you were able to sacrifice, and so the happier you could keep the gods. The theme of wealth and the consequent ability to make amends, sacrificial or otherwise, is central to Socrates' interaction with the old man Cephalus. Let's start with an outline. There's 3 sections in our lecture on Cephalus, and the titles are mine. 1. Garlands, in which we get a sense of the setting and the dynamic between Socrates and his host. 2. Unintentional cheating, in which we learn the true colors of Cephalus. And 3. Doing right, in which the main topic of the Republic is introduced and we begin to see Socrates' way of doing philosophy, specifically the Socratic method and his use of thought experiments. Section 1. Garlands. Cephalus was an old friend of Socrates, in addition to being Polemarchus' dad. More importantly, perhaps, he was a wealthy businessman, specifically an arms dealer. But he was also a foreigner, a medic, and so not an Athenian citizen. In the US context, we might say he was a resident alien. He couldn't vote, hold political office, or sit on a jury. But he could conduct his business and become a very wealthy member of the community. Socrates' exchange with Cephalus continues the slight tone of passive-aggressive menace set earlier by Polemarchus, as Cephalus chides Socrates for not making more of an effort to come and see him. As soon as he saw me, Cephalus welcomed me and said, "You don't come to the Piraeus to see us, Socrates, as often as you should. If I were still strong enough to make the journey to town easily, there would be no reason for you to come here. I would visit you. As it is, you ought to come here more frequently." I don't know about you, but to me this brings to mind the Hollywood version of a mafia don. Cephalus begins by professing his interest in intelligent conversation. I myself find that, as age blunts one's enjoyment of physical pleasures, one's desire for intelligent conversation and one's enjoyment of it increase correspondingly. But we will soon see that once the conversation turns actually intelligent, it gets uncomfortable for him. That's a theme we've seen in the Apology, of course. And the only real pleasure he seems to enjoy is being left in peace. The conversation starts somewhat impolitely, at least by our standards, with Socrates asking Cephalus what it is like to be not just old, but so very old that you're about to die. You are now at an age when you are, as the poets say, about to cross the bar, which is a euphemism for croak. And I would like to find out from you what you have to tell us. Is it a difficult time of life or not? But Cephalus gamely takes Socrates up on it. He explains that being so old isn't such a bad thing. For one thing, you're freed from the desire for love and sex, and the madness and slavery of passion. And in general, old age is a release from slavery to all your many passions. The proper attitude to our passions is a big theme in the Republic. Specifically, we'll encounter it again in Part 5, Section 3, about justice in the individual. And so we'll have occasion to get back to Cephalus' point here. Let's just say that in the final analysis, we'll find that old age has not, in fact, made Cephalus wise. For now, Cephalus proclaims that old people who don't see the upside and can't stop complaining about being old just have a flawed character. There's only one thing to blame for their lack of contentment in old age, and that is not their old age, Socrates, but their character. This allows Socrates to launch into his Socratic method of probing and asking for clarification. He challenges Cephalus that, dude, what helps you in your old age isn't your superior character, but your superior wealth. Cephalus, for now, is a good sport and agrees that money does make things easier. But he pushes back on Socrates to say that money isn't the cause of contentment. A good man may not find old age easy to bear if he's poor, but a bad man won't be contented even if he's rich. That's clever, since the contentment in question is precisely the kind of wisdom that allows you not to be swayed by your passions. Cephalus here states, almost verbatim, Socrates' own view of the particular kind of wisdom or excellence he talked about in the Apology. There, Socrates had said that wealth does not bring about excellence, but excellence makes wealth and everything else good for men. So Cephalus says, wealth does not make you good. Socrates says, wealth does not make you good. It seems like they're on the same page, and so far Cephalus proves himself to be quite the Socratic philosopher. But all that money doesn't make you a good person stuff is a little too glib from someone who spent his whole life in the pursuit of making loads and loads of money. So Socrates now pushes Cephalus a little harder and asks, once again rather bluntly, what exactly being so rich does allow him to do. What do you think is the greatest advantage you have gained from being so rich? Section 2. Unintentional cheating. Cephalus' answer to this question gets us within striking distance of the main theme of the Republic, the origin and nature of justice. He says that if you're about to die, you're afraid you'll go to hell because of all the bad things you did during your life, especially if you're an arms dealer. The man who finds that in the course of his life he has done a lot of wrong often wakes up at night in a terror, like a child with a nightmare, and his life is full of foreboding. And that's where money comes in. Wealth contributes very greatly to one's ability to avoid both unintentional cheating or lying and the fear that one has left some sacrifice to God unmade or some debt to man unpaid before one dies. Money helps because you can then buy your way out of your debts to the gods and to society. But note how twisted Cephalus' view actually is. Pause for a moment on the idea he invokes of unintentional cheating or lying. Unintentional cheating? Something seems off with that, doesn't it? Smacks of rationalization, perhaps. Think about it. Have you ever cheated on a test, say? Okay, let's assume you have. When you were cheating, did you know you were cheating? Seems like a ridiculous thing to ask because it is. If you didn't know that that's what you were doing, if you weren't aware that you were cheating, then you weren't cheating. Now, you may have unintentionally caught a glimpse of your neighbor's answer as your mind was wandering and your eye came to rest on their quiz sheet. But if you then take their answer and use it as your own instead, is that somehow automatic? Is it happening against your will? Is someone forcing you? Are you compelled to do it but don't actually mean to do it? Must cheat. Your looking may have been unintentional, but is your cheating unintentional? No, of course not. Unintentional cheating is an impossibility. It's either cheating and then it's intentional, or it's unintentional and then it's not cheating. This is even clearer when it comes to unintentional lying. The Oxford English Dictionary literally defines lying as making a false statement with the intention to deceive. Intention is part of the definition of lying. And what makes cheating and lying morally reprehensible is precisely this intention to deceive. If it wasn't for the intention to deceive, there'd be no need to atone, and it's, after all, atonement that Cephalus wants to use his money for. So, Cephalus is a jerk. He's a liar and a cheat, and he, quote, has done a lot of wrong, end quote. And now, at the end of his life, he's rationalizing it away as somehow unintentional and not his fault, and he's frantically sitting there in his garlands, going from offering to avoid having to go to hell. That's what's going on with Cephalus. Section 3. Doing right. But we're not done yet with the philosophical dismantling of Cephalus. In fact, Socrates himself doesn't get hung up on the unintentional cheating point at all. I just pointed that out because Plato stuck it in there to give us a sense of who that Cephalus character is. As for the philosophical weakness of Cephalus's position, we'll see it now. Socrates now does what he does best. Implicit in Cephalus's comment on the real value of money is a theory, a set of core beliefs or principles that he lives by. Such beliefs can be about what's right and wrong, what's fair and unfair, what's just and unjust, what's permissible and impermissible. They can also be about what's real and what's not, or what's desirable and what needs to be avoided. We all have those theories, and they are often intricate systems of interrelated theories that commit us to act and live our lives in certain ways. They can be so central to our sense of self, cultural identity, or plain basic outlook on the world as to be completely invisible to us. We often don't think about them at all, much less as theoretical commitments that we actively endorse or could, by the same token, refuse to endorse. What Socrates does best is to bring these hidden theoretical and practical commitments into broad daylight and to see if they are consistent or make sense. In Cephalus's case, he's so wrapped up in the idea that his wealth sets him apart from everyone else and allows him to get away with almost anything that he either can't handle or can't understand when Socrates points out to him that his theory is internally inconsistent. So the first thing Socrates teases out of Cephalus's view is that it means that right and wrong consist in some kind of action, doing right. This seems about right, no pun, but it is really important for the remainder of Part 1 of the Republic because in one way or another all theories of justice floated in the next several sections bump up against the limitations of the view that justice is a kind of action, and so we'll eventually have to find a better view. Speaking of what Socrates does best, he next wonders if the kinds of action he has identified as lying at the core of Cephalus's view of doing right, namely being truthful and returning what you owe, instead of always being right in all cases, aren't rather only sometimes right and at other times wrong. Note that there's something really important going on in the background, pointing to actions that would be right or just by Cephalus's definition, but that aren't actually right or just, already points to a different, independent and intuitive standard of right and wrong by which we measure the procession of definitions of justice that Cephalus, Polemachus, Thrasymachus, and Glaucon and Adeimantus offer here and in subsequent sections. Now Socrates, continuing to do what he does best, nimbly switches methods. He just started with what we in philosophy have come to call the Socratic method of teasing out and interrogating people's implicit theoretical and practical commitments. Now that such a commitment is on the table, in the present case that doing right consists in being truthful and returning what we owe, Socrates uses the method we call thought experiment. He constructs a scenario in which the very same actions of being truthful and returning what you owe are, by the independent and intuitive standard mentioned earlier, not the right thing to do. For instance, if one borrowed a weapon from a friend who subsequently went out of his mind and then asked for it back, surely it would be generally agreed that one ought not to return it, and that it would not be right to do so, or to consent to tell the strict truth to a madman. So imagine this. Your friend owns a gun. You ask them if you could borrow it for, I don't know, target practice for a week. Your friend is also madly in love. But before the week's out, said love interest cheats on them. They have a complete mental breakdown. Now your friend comes banging on your door. Give me my gun. I'ma shoot him. I'ma shoot him. Wah! As Socrates says, by that independent and intuitive standard mentioned, it would be generally agreed. Not a good idea. But If we take Cephalus' theory of right and wrong to be a good theory that tells us what's in fact right and wrong, then returning that gun and telling them the truth, I don't know, that their BO just wasn't working for the person they were with, would be exactly what we'd have to do. Socrates concludes that telling the truth and returning what we have borrowed is not the definition of doing right. Now, one would think that if Cephalus was truly interested in intelligent conversation, as he professed at the outset, then he'd follow Socrates' curiosity wherever it leads and would try to come up with a better account of what doing right truly consists in. But not only does he now hand the argument over to his son, but basically saying, I'm too old for this, flat out contradicting what he earlier said about how being free from the slavery of the passions frees you up for the life of the mind, but he also says, gotta go, make another sacrifice, effectively sticking with the desperate theory, using money to right past wrongs, by which he's trying to save his afterlife that's just been proven completely unworkable. Talk about cognitive dissonance. Remember what Polemachus said earlier about how you can't persuade people who won't listen? Well, Cephalus is exhibit A of that. Clearly, so far, Socrates' shtick is not working too well down in the Piraeus.